Okay, we will go ahead and adjourn our agenda meeting for today, March 17th. Started, not adjourn. That was quick. I was trying to beat.
Thank you, folks.
I was trying to beat last month's record of 7 minutes, but we didn't. But yeah, we'll start our agenda meeting tonight, March 17th. With that, you can see that Ms. Phillips will be doing the pledge and meditation. We'll have our exemplars of excellence with Dr. Parker and the teachers of the year. Any questions about those? And then we will go into our presentations, which we are doing tonight. Yeah.
We're doing right now.
I don't know who's leading it.
Do you want to go?
We want to go ahead and do it?
Yeah, we can go ahead and do
Yeah,
it.
so,
Is that a new thing we're doing?
Well, we have a high number of people signed up to speak Thursday night, and so this is a quick budget update. It's simply looking at the feedback that we got from community meetings, and then the initial look at budget revenue sources. If it's the board's pleasure, we can do it Thursday night. We're trying to.
if I may.
Mr. President.
So if I just give a thought to that, we have more community members here.
That's fine. We'll
present,
do it Thursday.
and But I
Yeah.
get that we're going to have a very long Thursday night.
It completely
That's
up
my
to you
thought,
guys.
but-
We can do it Thursday.
I look at you all because actually every long Thursday night, I think about you all who have to still go on.
Let's
So it's
just for
really.
Clinton, if we can press it to Thursday, we'll press it to Thursday.
If I may, I just tell you what we did last year. I think we cut it in two parts. We did one part in a work session on Monday and one part on Thursday. We just kind of combined them together. So just,
I'm the only one who said that, so somebody else.
No, we can do it Thursday. Yeah, we can do Thursday, the presentation, like we normally do.
Wait, so are we doing, if y'all did them today, y'all wouldn't do them Thursday?
Right.
Oh, well, then don't do them today.
I agree with that.
I mean, it's up to y'all, I'm leaving at 8 o'clock. That's the maximum. Go ahead, on the record now.
It's
Leave it at
not,
8 o'clock. I
it's
got
not a
kids and we do
super
bath time
long
week.
one,
Yeah, it's not
and
long.
actually, you've got the packet in front of you, so if
So
you
we can do
review
it.
it, it's not one that should generate a ton of conversation, so we'll just do it
Thursday.
Thursday.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
I do have a question though.
Yeah,
about
Ms.
budget.
Jones.
Which I haven't looked at the packet, so this might be in the packet.
Can you
However.
speak in your microphone, please? Thank you, I'm sorry.
You're okay. So I have a question about the budget, and this may be in the budget packet, but I don't know because I haven't looked in it. However, are facilities, any facilities or athletic facilities in that budget, or monies for that?
in this, we're just talking about the other funds, which is the grant money
Okay.
and just a initial projection on revenue. So we haven't even gotten to the expenditure side.
Okay, well, I'm getting a lot of heat in District 5 about facilities and inequities in facilities, like places that don't have lights or or seating or even a field. I mean, I had a really long conversation today about Sail Creek and their football field, but it was about a softball field. But just saying, I was just wondering if we were gonna, if any of that will be touched in the budget. I'm just putting that out there. I'll send a formal email later
Typically-
on with some other things. But
Typically, the way we've handled that in the past is look at fund balance, especially at the end of the years, we're putting additional funds there and at times pulled funds from fund balance to cover big projects like that.
Okay, we'll do presentations on Thursday. That will bring us down to the consent agenda. Anything under the executive committee report or field trips? Sherry, we had one
Yes.
that we needed to pull, correct?
Yes, it's the Signal Mountain one. It's on Dr. Reynolds and Dr. Sharp. There's one for Signal Mountain to London, and they have pulled that, but it's still on there. So we do need to mention that. I'll do an amendment on it for Thursday so that I will have that in the minutes, that that's been pulled and they're not planning to attend.
So we will be pulling item number 8 on that Signal Mountain Middle High School to London.
Correct.
Anything else under field trips? Okay.
One quick
Mr.
question,
Press.
probably to you, Ms. Houghton. Because being from Signal, and I knew that we were gonna pull that already, but, the one question that I had was an issue of liabilities and, insurance and what our insurance covers on these trips, and if there's anything it doesn't cover that we need to be aware of. And when I was looking at all the field trips, I just thought, I've never asked that generally, so I'd be curious to know about that.
So I think Scott Thursday would probably be able to speak to that better than we could. I mean, anytime we go on a field trip, there's liability involved, and he could speak. This has been asked in the past about, especially overseas, but it hasn't come up in 2.5 years, obviously. And so I would prefer to wait for him to be
Okay.
here to
That's
answer
fine.
that. if
That's
okay.
fine. I mean, I have that question.
Oh,
there,
Mary,
and
I'm
I
sorry, I
got-
didn't see you.
No, you're fine.
Sorry,
Oh, Mary.
I apologize.
And as you mentioned, it's been 2.5 years. I knew this at one point, and it's not at the front of my brain right now. So, but
And
I'll
I
make
can
sure
send an
we've got
email,
it.
and I can get, even if there's something that
Sure,
was discussed 2.5 years ago that you can point to.
we'll
that's
make
fine.
sure
I
to
just
get you
wanted-
that. Absolutely.
Mary, I apologize.
No, no
I did
problem.
not see you.
No, not at all. I'm fine just to sit here.
Okay, going from there, we go to bids and contracts. Sherry, do we need to add that one that we have on our, so you have a memo from our Director of IT that we will be adding to the agenda as well. So anything under bids and contracts?
I have a question about this.
Yeah, Mr. Walker.
Is this a local company, Essential Technologies?
It's a company that we've been using, and we'll have to bring this back to you because this is basically just permission to utilize E-rate. And so when the bid actually goes through and the contract is, we'll have to bring it back to you to approve the actual contract. This is just asking approval to use E-rate. So E-rate allows us to like get reimbursed up to, I think, 80% of what we spend. So it's kind of a program that helps us save money on broadband, on computers, things like that. But we use Central Technologies a lot. I don't want to say they're local, and they're not, but I'm pretty sure they're Louisville.
Maybe it's a self-funded program. Where does the money come from? Is that where we get the rent from the towers and that kind of stuff? No? Nothing.
So we have to pay for it, and then E-rate reimburses us.
Okay.
So when we spend the money, then E-rate reimburses us up to 80%. So if we're spending $1,000, we pay the $1,000, get $800 back, or what we end up paying is $200.
Okay, what about the money that we do get from rental? We haven't talked about that in
Like the
years.
Cell tower.
Cell
rentals.
tower, yeah.
That's in a self-funded, and I can.
I mean, that's okay. I just
Yeah.
didn't know if we had any more of those. I know we had, what, a couple, 2, 3? At one time, it was going to the school, and then they said it was gonna go to technology. I just don't know whatever happened with that. And I thought some of the, James and them might like to understand what that's all about. To the people that don't know, might be good to explain that at some point.
Okay.
Thanks.
It is, if you do have questions, it's a line item in the budget. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know East Ridge has one. Can't think of
CSAS.
CSAS.
I'm sorry, CCA.
but yeah, it goes to that. But it is a line item in the actual budget. It's split, isn't it?
I want to say that it's half and
50-50,
half.
yeah.
but don't
50-50, okay.
quote.
I will confirm that.
Okay, so we will be adding that memo to the agenda. Anything under financial reports? Anything there?
The school
Thurman.
fees, yeah, the school fees, if you don't mind, this D4. Of course, I'm glad that we have the school fee thing worked out, but everybody has to also know that that's voluntary, it's not mandatory. But some of these prices for some of these other things, I don't know how you ever get those things under control. But wow, some of the cost to do some of these things, it just really prevents a lot of kids from being able to do a lot of things. The athletic fees, so that's something I would still like to address at some point when we can. Giving parents a break on this because they're raising money all the time for their kids to pay athletics, and I just don't think that's fair. I just don't think that's good. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth.
I wanna echo that,
Chris.
because, and I sent an email, just curious, and I know that it's hard to track all this down, but I'd be curious what an investment would look like into supporting some of these, opportunities. And maybe it's completely, but again, it's how do we do things differently and maybe get different results? And I agree. I think a lot of students would benefit from any of the extracurriculars, and as they're currently there, may be completely out of their reach. So, and I know we've talked about the opportunities beyond that, but for a lot of parents, they see that number, and automatically that means my kid's not going to do that. And so, anyways, but because as we look at budget, maybe that's something we need to consider toward that, even if it's ESSER funds used toward some sort of support of extracurricular, helps build teamwork and engagement, and we know our students are hurting right now, so.
Okay, we jump down a little bit. Anything under budget amendments? School nutrition, we hit school fees. Anything on those?
Oh, wait, sorry, I do have something in here.
Ms. Robinson.
Yeah, I just wanted to look really quickly at 9.177 Best for All District Grant. Just wanted to, I don't think that we've actually spoke as a board about how that grant is being spent. If we did, I apologize. Like,
So,
is there
remember,
anything-
we just found that out
Yeah.
like right before Save the System. You did a great job.
I
of,
announced it, that's right.
announcing it. So we have not determined
Mayor
how
Commissioner
we
didn't even know what I was talking
spend
about.
it.
It was great.
It's got to be aligned though with the original goals of what we put ESSER into. I mean, the whole reason we got it was recognizing the fact that we've been strategic with ESSER funds. So
Okay, so can you kind of remind us then?
It's 410,000, I'm double checking.
So in the document, it shows, yeah, it's just a one pager. It really just shows, it going toward just regular instruction and supplies, but is it like a bit more specific than that on how we're actually using these dollars?
I think what we got recognized for was our approaches regarding learning loss, specifically some of that summer programming and that D360 work, that foundational literacy work, is really where we got a lot of attention. So I think what they said is really general, but we would expect that we're going to put towards the same things that we're removing barriers to learning, helping accelerate because there's an opportunity that we're down the road.
So then the money that we were already budgeted to spend on those programs, are we now able to shift that money somewhere else? Or we're gonna now just double invest into those line items?
Yeah,
I think it's maybe a little bit of both, but probably more doubling
Okay.
on those efforts.
Okay.
yeah. And I'm thinking, like, I'm listening to my right, with specifically with Relay, we have a really unique opportunity, and this opportunity to ask us to reimagine what that instructional equity looks like. And we really have, you know, I say we've seen it for a long time, but we haven't been able to be a strategic in our response to it. I would imagine, you know, we're going to be looking at some of that space there.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I look forward to learning more about that. Hey, speaking sorry, when are we rolling out signups for? I'm trying to send my kids, number one. I do think that the quicker or the sooner we can tell parents dates, because a lot of people have already signed up. They're booking camps, they're spending money out the nose on camps right now, and man, they'd be excited if they knew they had a free summer camp option. It's gonna propel their kids forward.
I think the window will open from,
Oh, cool.
I can get you a confirmation.
Oh, that's great. And so the district will make an announcement Friday. That's great. Yeah. And I remember the spots at the schools were, they went fast, like, at preferred schools. So, okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay, anything else there? Down to school fees. Okay, we have the Stellar Therapy Agreement and the update to the 2022-2023 school calendar.
What's that all about? I didn't see the calendar.
It wasn't clickable
It wasn't. It's clickable now. We got that fixed.
See,
It was
it wasn't clickable.
Well, that's why you shouldn't be
Well,
a,
I start on
you shouldn't
Friday.
be an eager
studying
beaver. You
stuff.
should wait till it gets there.
So,
It's not clickable on my version.
It's clickable now.
I've got it right here in front of me and I'm clicking it and I'm not clicking it.
So December 16th, 2022 and May 24th, 2023.
Yeah.
So this goes back to when we approved this before. There were some, yeah,
Yeah.
and it goes back to when the state was approving asynchronous school days, and we approved this according to that. Now, if you remember, we had to do this with this current year. We had to turn them into stockpile days, and so this is basically just correcting to where we're going full days there, and we can't use those asynchronous days. So it
Well, I think
affects the
that's a good thing.
16th of December and the 25th of May, it's the last days.
And
So-
it just turns them to regular
Regular
school
school
days.
days.
So do you envision us forever having asynchronous days?
So if you remember where this came out of, it came out of 3.5 years ago in speaking with HCEA, and teachers really wanted additional planning time.
Yeah.
And so we put these days in there to provide additional planning time. I have not heard, the complaints that we get about them, obviously they're for families at times, it can be inconvenient, but internally, there's sometimes a little bit of tension between administration and teachers about, is it planning or is it working together on a project or having this PD? And so I think we've got to clarify there, but the original intent to provide teachers more planning, I think we need to stick with. The question I think becomes is, maybe do we look at using stockpile days to help with the calendar and the number of
Yeah.
days we have to go?
I hear a lot of complaints from parents, really more from the perspective that it's the term asynchronous that really throws them off and like gets them riled up. And I think it's because I think the term asynchronous really came out during COVID, right? And I was like,
So we
okay, this
turn
means
back to teacher planning or
Yeah.
professional
Yeah.
development.
like it is interesting because like parents will say to me, I just wish it was just a half day, and it's like, okay, or just a day off, and it's like, it is funny because pre-2020 you would have said something very different, but I think it's the term asynchronous. So okay.
If I may clarify, enrollment actually opened last Monday, and parents can enroll through Power School for our REACH program. And if anyone has any trouble, go to the school site and we can help you log on at the school. And it's also on our website.
Would parents have been notified only if like their student is being recommended to go to REACH, or should all schools be making an announcement at this point?
I'm sure it's open. It's
Okay.
open enrollment.
We've got some social media stuff that
Okay.
should be
Okay.
coming out on a pretty regular cadence until it gets built.
Okay.
I know
I'm-
some schools have gotten calls out.
They have, okay. Cool, okay.
I will say, just because we're talking about the calendar, and I know this is pretty much set in stone, but for future, spring break and tying it to Easter that's a whole can of worms that we probably don't want to open. But I mean, looking at next week, that first part of the school year, the second semester, that's 13 weeks until spring break, and then come back for 7 weeks and go pretty much right into testing. That's a lot of weeks in coming back, but that's just to point that out for whenever we want to do the next couple years down the road.
Had a lot of internal discussions about the same thing.
But I think
Especially
we
in this
allowed
week.
the public to, we allowed the public to help
About
with this past, you know what I
4 or
mean?
5
Like,
years
so,
ago.
but, well, no, but it's, we planned multiple years
Yeah, yeah,
ahead,
yeah.
so.
It feels a lot longer in it than it does when it looks on paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just throwing that one out there. Okay, moving on from the school year calendar, the Orchard Knob Middle School turnaround pilot. Can you just give us a quick overview of kind of what it is and how it ties into it?
Yes. So the state really designated 4 areas that they wanted to see the plan be built around. One is instruction, right? Instructional transformation. Another one is culture. Another one is talent, teachers, and the other one is leadership. And so as we worked with Ed Directions, I mean, those are the big buckets. So it's very natural. Working with Ed Directions, we wanted to align with what the state priorities were in those 4, while also aligning with the district's strategic plan, which we do really well there, and then to be really sort of structured and intentional in that space. What you'll see in the plan, I think the most significant difference in this plan versus what you would see as just a standard school action plan is the continuous improvement cycle. What's built into this plan is a 30, 60, 90-day review over and over and over again against the initiatives to try to be more responsive to those pieces. So yeah, I can go further in depth, but that's the high level.
Yeah, high level overview. Any questions on that? Get back to the top here. Okay, that will bring us to the Cigna property located at 7555 Goodwin Road. Any questions about that? Dr. Robertson, do you want to?
Well, I just wanted to provide context. This is the property that's immediately across the street from the existing East Brainerd Elementary. It sits on 90-plus acres. There's about a 93,000 square foot office space that is in very good condition. And so this developer has purchased it. They're in a due diligence period and have an interest in us purchasing it from them. Spoken with county mayor. He is open to the idea of county government purchasing it and then the school board allocating funds over the next couple of fiscal years to renovate that building for use as a school facility. So this is obviously pending county commission approval, and then for us to allocate funds to renovate it, we would have to come back and get permission for that as well. So this is really just saying we're open to the concept of county government purchasing it and then school board funding the renovation.
Ms. Jones.
For clarity purposes for the world, Justin, the Hamilton County world, so that the news can take this back, are we about to build a new school there this school year? Tomorrow?
No,
Within a
it's
year?
Good question. It would probably be over, a couple year. Like I would say the earliest would be 24, maybe 25 that the school would open. So I think when you think about this in the larger picture of what we're trying to do, I've had a couple of people ask me, like, was this even in the plan? There, in phase 1 of the MGT report, there is a recommendation actually to build a new elementary on the existing CSLA site.
Right.
And so this would actually be in lieu of that
So we would still have that property as well?
Yeah, I don't see us selling that CSLA
And
property.
one more thing, can you explain to the public, I hope the news is getting this, why across from East Brainerd Elementary? Like, the questions I'm hearing is why a school across from a school?
Yeah,
So
well,
can we just go ahead
it
and talk
is-
about that too?
To us, it's an efficiency move. I mean, the MGT report, I think, estimated a new elementary on the CSLA site that we already own the property at $35 million. And in this case, we're probably going to be able to put 800 kids in a building that's maybe going to cost somewhere between 17 and 20 million.
But
Go ahead.
I think because you're talking about putting K through 2 in this building and then some.
I think that's a conversation down the
Yeah.
road of if if it
3 through
turns
5,
into a
maybe.
K2 at
Right.
that side and then a 3-5 at the existing side, I think we've got to have some conversations there. I think the point being is just from an efficiency standpoint, we know sooner rather than later, we're gonna need more capacity down East Brainerd Road. I mean, from Appison to Westview to East Brainerd, it's, there's not a lot of room. And so this is an opportunity to get more capacity in an efficient way.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that our friends in the public relations sector go back with the right information and are able to share that, and that it goes back to, this wasn't some wild hair idea, but this is something that goes back to all the money we spent on consulting to advise us of things and what that looks like, so they can stop calling us and asking us stuff, not people, but media. I just want to go on record for that, making sure that's clear.
Mr. Perez.
So just a question, a concern, and I know that we don't actually have an answer yet. But as the governor has mentioned, the possibility of properties that are not in use being part of this roll into a charter school for $1. Obviously, there's many concerns about that, but if we aren't doing something with the property, I would want to be very sure that that property doesn't fall into this.
Well, we are. It's essentially will be under construction for the period. I mean, right now the company is just in a due diligence period, so they've got to go through the process of finishing their purchase and then process the purchase of, the county getting it, and then us renovating it. So we would be in the process of renovating it. But I hear what you're saying, and
Well, and we need to
pay attention
we need
to
to
that.
start thinking and paying attention to that for other properties that we may, that taxpayers have paid for, but we may lose to. You show me how. We'll go.
Ms. Thurman.
Just for, I think that in your memo to us that you put that you might, looking at 10, 15 million maybe to renovate that building to make it into,
probably
for a
to
school.
renovate it 7 to 10.
7 to 10, and which is versus 35 that we were looking at having to build a whole new school. And Coritz is right, it doesn't make sense to put 2 elementary schools right across the street, but I think if we break it up, I think that might be probably the best way to go. But just want people to understand that that it's, because the county's going to buy it and just let us have it, and that's the way a lot of schools used to be. A lot of our schools used to belong to the county. Well, technically they belong to the county even when we pay for them. They still belong to the county. So I think that's a wise move. Hopefully it will work out. Okay.
Ms. Robinson.
Whenever I spoke to Dr. Robertson about this last week, it makes all the sense in the world. And to Rhonda's point, to take on this opportunity, it's going to be at least a third or 2/3 less than what it would be to build a new school. But I do think that it's time that our board come back to our facilities plan, like overall, especially with the fact that in less than a year, we're going to have to sit down and start thinking about our new strategic plan for the next 5 years. And so, I am supportive of this opportunity, but what I'd really like to see is just us to really have a much better handle on what our long-term facility plan is. And we're going to always get opportunities like this kind of piecemealed and dropped into our lap. It's just how real estate works. But I think that if we could get a better handle on the overall plan, then we're going to feel better whenever we get these things dropped in our lap too. So I don't really know what that needs to look like as the next step, but maybe after budget season, that's what we can really start to focus our attention on.
Ms. Hill.
Thank you, Chair. To Tiffany's point, I've had some conversations with Dr. Robertson and folks at the county. I think that where we might see the most success moving forward with the facilities plan would be for the board's facilities representative, which may be you, Ms. Robinson, and Dr. Robertson, potentially Mary Ellen as a CFO, and maybe somebody from strategy. Those
those 4 from the school system, and then the county commission's education representative, the county mayor, this county CFO, and the leader of the regional planning administration that serves the county. If those folks were working together, I think you might be more nimble and be able to look at a larger solution. You know, I think we as a body have talked about that. I believe the county commission has talked about that. But when you have 9 people around a table, we just can't get as much accomplished. And I would love to see that kind of group take the MGT, the growth studies for the county, et cetera, and bring both bodies a plan that we can then take apart and put back together. I think that could be really useful to all of the constituents and all of our students in Hamilton County.
Ms. Thurman.
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons that we haven't really gotten together for the facilities, I talked to Justin about this the other day. We're going to be having 2 more school board members, and we're going to be having we don't know how many new county commissioners and a new mayor. And it's going to be hard to start a conversation with an outgoing mayor because he will not commit for anything for an incoming mayor. So we may have to wait until after August to know exactly where we stand. So we can make plans of that, but I just don't see us getting anything done before, say, August on that.
I think it's my district. I think it's, I guess we walked that building in September last year.
No, we actually, we met with the realtor before Brian left, so it was like
August. July, yeah. So we've kind of known about it. There were several developers that were interested. One got it, and they're in their due diligence phase, and I think it could be a great way for us to slowly tackle our facilities things. I think it will be a good pressure relief valve for that area as we go, because you're talking about adding not only 700-ish seats,
750, 800
yeah,
probably.
to that building, but also freeing up another amount across if you do a split across there. So it's a great opportunity for us, because the only other large chunk of land out there is our CSLA property, which we'll be able to keep in case we need for down the road. So I think it's a great overall strategy to tackle it there.
It looks like there's a lot of property there. 95 acres?
96 acres.
96 acres.
And again, we're getting the building and about 23
Okay, so
existing
how much
acres
of that are we
around.
getting?
It'd be about 23 acres. That building, if you have a packet, it has like 700 parking spots, which an elementary school doesn't need, clearly. So you'll be able to kind of transform some of that stuff, and the
So we
developers.
got 23 of that, and then the county, the rest of it. Okay.
No.
No.
The developer.
The developer has
yeah,
it. Okay.
That's right.
Okay, moving on for that, we will go to the request approval for one-time employee bonuses. Any questions on that?
Are you going to say anything?
Yeah, I'm just writing everybody down real quick. Ms. Hill.
What's the fiscal note on that?
I think it was about 2.8 million, I think is the number.
And this is recommending $500 per full-time employee, $250 per part-time employee, and $500 per route for bus drivers?
Yeah, so if you think about what that means is per route is per contract and employee bus drivers that run multiple buses.
So you and I had a conversation last week, Justin, about the equation that's done to manage fuel costs.
Yep.
So that's being taken care of.
The fuel is, but I mean, when you think about, again, in our mind as we were developing this, it's taking into consideration, retention of bus drivers, the work they've done for us the last couple of years. And in the past, we haven't included bus drivers in some of these opportunities. And personally, I felt like that, was a misstep. So it is
So-
an addition to what we typically do.
So do you all know when inflation's gonna go away?
I don't think anyone knows.
You don't think anybody knows when inflation's gonna go away? So once the $500 is spent, inflation may still be there, right?
It's for sure going to be there.
So once the $500 is spent, or in our case, the $2.8 million is spent, inflation's still gonna be there, right? I question the usefulness of this $2.8 million spend, yeah. Yeah, that's all. I'll be interested to hear the conversation, thank you.
Mr. Walker.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me when we look at 2.8 million and Carit's stating something about maybe ball fields or things like that, something that could be there permanently. I just, I struggle with both of them, and probably gonna get in trouble for having that opinion because as we do our disclaimer, this affects somebody that I'm close with. 500 sounds great, and I love the idea to be able to love on our employees. I just really need a couple days to kind of get around $2.8 million. And maybe that's not even asking for any response from you guys or not. I really, really struggle with that. That's a lot. And as Jenny says, inflation is going to be here. Do we come back in 3 months and ask again? And I don't think that we do, but I just really struggle with this. I need to, need to have this discussion and be able to make me feel good about one way or the other.
Ms. Thurman.
Yeah, I'm with the others about this. As much as I would like to do this, like I say, the 2.8 million, and we were just talking a minute ago about taking money out of fund balance to do some things. How much could we do for the 2.8 million? I have some things in my district as other people do as well. Even though I really like the idea of being able to do this, but really inflation hasn't hit school employees any more than it has anybody else, any more than it has me or anybody else who has a job. If we're just going to be able to, I don't know. I just have a real problem with this. As much as I would like to do this, I'm like James. I'm just going to have to kind of think through this. I know I told you, Dr. Robertson, when I talked to you about this, that I would have to have a few days to think about it, and I've thought about it, and I've been all over the map on it. And but it's just something. I say $2.8 million is a lot of money, and because the inflation is going to hit us here as well at the school system, and we might need that money for something that we absolutely have to have it for. So I'm just going to have to think about it.
Mr. Perez.
So I have a couple questions. Mr. McClendon, this is your, Chairman McClendon, this is your request. Can you, and Dr. Robertson and I spoke on Friday, but I think this is important. Like, can you all talk about the process to get to this request? Because this request to me, again, we all know, and everyone's spoken about inflation and about rising costs, but it did come as a surprise.
So we did a similar bonus to this. It just did not. I'm going to speak. We did a similar bonus to this in October or November of last year, and that bonus came out of ESSER 2 or 3, which one of those two grants. And so there were conversations back then even about doing an additional one, and those conversations preceded, this administration. It's come back up a couple of times, and so, felt like the timing, if we were going to do it, the timing made sense. I hear what you're saying. I mean, this is it's a tough call. I mean, the intent, I think, on the board's part and on the administration's part is to support our employees and do what we can. And it is a big number, so I understand it's a tough decision.
So it came from October because the
No,
memo.
we did a similar
Yeah,
bonus.
but I'm asking about this request, but you're saying that in October, there was already conversation about this.
Right.
Of course, then we didn't have the situation we have now, but, okay, so that's first. In my world, when we give a bonus, we gotta keep 25% and send it to federal withholdings. Is that the same here? Okay.
I don't think we've processed it that way.
Okay, because in my world, they would only get 350, they would not get,
Yeah, it comes out.
it does, the 25% comes
Well,
straight
I
up.
don't know what the percentage is, but we don't,
In my world, it's 25%.
you don't get $500. You
Yeah,
get-
if you give a bonus, you don't get
$389.
$500 of a bonus, you get whatever minus the withholding of a bonus, which is different from the withholding of your salary. So anyway, so that's another element, so we're not actually giving people $500 to cover. In my world, it would work out to $350, so that reduces. I had a question also about the different routes, but I still don't quite understand that. So my point is that's the only one, I wouldn't even say positive thing about inflation, because it's not positive, is that if things cost more, so does sales tax. And if sales tax increases, so should our revenue increase. And if our revenue, again, I'm not saying that's a positive for us who suffer this, but it's a reality, and if our revenue increases, I am curious to Ms. Hill's point, if there is something we could do that actually deals with inflation from a long-term basis that works under the withholdings of normal income. And to me, there's two separate categories, and they're not the part-time versus full-time necessarily. Because that's the other thing that I've struggled with this proposal, is that we all get the same, whoever it is gets the same across the board, whether they're, if they're full-time, and then if they're part-time, have that. So as I've thought about it, we all went to the gas pump at some point, and we all saw shock when we registered the number that was there, and that's a reality for everybody. For many people, that's part of what we're gonna, have to deal with right now, and there's reasons behind that. But there are people who are still making so little in our school system that if I were in their shoes, I would have to be considering a different job. Not because I don't love the job that I have, not because I don't care about the students, not because I don't want to end here, but because I just can't afford anymore to work there. So my thought, I think it's perhaps a good initial, and hearing the board maybe, but I have a question about revenue and if there's going to be an increase based on inflation and property values going up. And I know that the commission, and there's no way that on an election year, the commission, though it might be a way to go out, the commission is going to consider a change of that. But I'd like to see that. And then I would suggest a proposal from you all as the administration that would look especially at those whose salaries, and it may include all teachers, but those whose salaries are truly, the margins just do not allow at this point to cover these costs. We are having trouble hiring a lot of positions, and add to that incredibly high inflation costs. And again, and it may include teachers. I just would like a more, worked out proposal to think of something like that would make a long-term impact to our employees.
Mr. Walker.
Just to follow up, and I think I already know the answer because I don't think we can give this bonus, and I hate the word bonus because bonus is something that's fun versus this needed extra in their pocket is really what it is. Is there any way that we can look at, say, employees that are 50,000 below, or, and I'd like to say, I think I know the answer. I think that if one gets it, everybody gets it. Somebody that makes six figures may not, they're not concerned about it, but would love to see their teammate get the 500. Is that against policy to offer to one, group, say?
I don't think there's, I think it's just whatever the board desires. I think that brings in a lot of other questions that we may want to consider before looking at it, but I don't know of anything. I would have to ask Mary to investigate that further for us.
And then the second part, and this may be way too involved because we talked about it a little bit the other day. I just wanted to say that Justin and I talked because everybody else seems to say they had a conversation with Justin. I'm just kidding. We talked about the bus the other day, and it may be way too involved, but can you kind of briefly re-educate me on what's built in their contracts as far as fuel
About
ratio?
the gas?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, sure. So, Ms. Hill mentioned this as well. So in our contract with our employee and contract drivers and with First Student, there's a mechanism that is in there to help with the fluctuating cost of gas. So essentially every 2 weeks, we take a sample from 5 different parts of the community. So gas stations in Saudi, gas stations on Signal, downtown, East Brainerd, Ooltewah. I think those are the 5, but if they're wrong, maybe a little off. But you get the idea. Average that together, and then that's the price per gallon of diesel that we use to calculate payment for our bus drivers. And so every 2 weeks that happens to help with when gas prices go up or when gas prices go down. And the floor level is $2.25, so if it ever went below $2.25, they just stay at $2.25.
So that's an ongoing process.
Right.
Whether we're at inflation right now.
Correct.
I got you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
And does that come from an adjustment to our budget?
I don't know of a time that we've ever had to come back and ask. There have been times where we've had more in transportation at the end of the year than we used, but I would bet in 2008 or 2007, whenever that was, I would think transportation probably had to do an amendment to add for gas, but in the years I've been here, I can't recall of the time that we had to ask for more to pay for gas.
Ms. Hill.
Just a quick point. Thank you, Chair. 2 things. Number one, even if our revenue increases, we can expect inflation to affect the cost that we pay for all goods and services. We're seeing, I approve purchases weekly for the city of Chattanooga, and we've seen up to 85% increases in goods and services. And a 10%, 25% increase is just normal right now. And so Rhonda's point about essential costs, I think should be carefully heeded. The other thing is, as an employer myself and as an employee myself, I recognize that money is a motivator, but it is not the only motivator. And a payment of $500 or $250 will have a very short effect of motivation for many people, especially when we start talking about the taxes being taken out. So if in fact job satisfaction is the goal of this, I fear that that is not what we would achieve with it. It might be interesting, to Marco's point about low-paid employees, to know, okay, if we've got an employee at $14 an hour that we're trying to get to 15, what does it look like to give all of those employees a 50-cent raise right now or a $1 raise? Because that, for our lowest paid employees, could have a very long-term effect on employee satisfaction. I'm not going to be here to vote on this, but were I to be here, I would vote no. Thank you.
Ms. Robinson.
Yeah, this is really difficult. I think that on one hand, to Jenny's point of motivation coming out of the last 2 years, it feels like, we're on the brink of so much turmoil with our staffing. But to the point of, I mean, the reality is that we may be entering a recession, and it's historically there's never not been a recession after a gas hike the way that we're seeing it right now. So, and I pay very close attention to this in my work. So, Marco brought up a good point though. Like if you got to take out 25% to pay to the government, maybe there's a more creative way to do this. Maybe this is a little to Jenny's point too, but can the money be contributed in a different way? Like maybe it's an HSA contribution, so then it's tax-free, or maybe it is in the form of gas stipend, and that way it actually feels like it's meeting the need of what we're trying to accomplish here. So, I mean, on one hand, I look at it as like $500 as a bonus is less than $50 a month spread out over a year. Truthfully, like that doesn't make a big dent, especially the way that inflation is going. On the other hand, $2.8 million is pretty significant, and will it make the impact that we want? I don't know if it does as a one-time bonus, but maybe it does in a different way, either to the point Jenny's making, like as some form of a pay increase for our lowest paid employees, or maybe it's an HSA contribution, maybe it's in the form of a gas contribution. I mean, there are a lot of ways to do this to where I think you can get the full $500 given to the employee and then be able to use it in a way that feels a whole lot more impactful than what, it may be just adding to their paycheck. So just a thought to consider. At my own company, we recently have given everybody that drives to and from work as part of their day-to-day job. So it's primarily our maintenance people. We've given them an extra $100 a paycheck just for gas because, yeah, gas is like crazy right now, but it's also like a limited period of time. Like we only gave them this increase while gas prices are like very high. So anyways, that's how we're doing it at my work. So thanks.
Ms. Thurman.
Yeah, Penny, I guess this question is for you. I know we were looking at the scale, the pay scale. Where are we with that? Was that going to be reflected in this budget this time? Because we were looking at redoing a lot of the office staff that really is very much underpaid, and some of the other workers that we have that are very, very important, the worker bees that are important for the schools to run. And we were looking at that, and then where are we on that?
So Mary Ellen and I have met with the consultant again, and so she is working through the budget pieces to see what we can afford for next year, and then we'll bring it to you.
Okay, so
Because you're exactly right, yes.
So that's
we have
still,
a lot of
it's still
office staff.
ongoing?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. We have a lot of school office staff that need some adjustments, as well as, we've talked about our educational assistants and, those school-based positions, so.
Yeah, and then also, some people have brought it to my attention that, like if we post a job that say pays $17 an hour, and then the people get their first paycheck and they're kind of in shock because that $17 an hour is stretched out over 12 months.
Right.
And so it's actually just what, $14 and something an hour?
They're on expanded pay, so
Yeah.
that they have their benefits through the summer.
Yeah, so they have their benefits through the summer,
Right.
but I think that's something we need to tell people, because a lot of people call and say, hey, my check is, whatever. And so I think that's one thing that we need to be sure that people understand, that even though you're getting $17, it's just $17 for the time you're there, but it's spread out over 12 months. And
Yes.
make sure people understand that.
No, that's a great point. And we've talked about how to communicate that better to employees, and it is difficult to understand. We try to put it in the offer letter, but I still think it's probably a little confusing. So we need to break it down a little bit more for folks too.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Some of we've went back and forth on this, but yeah, Dr. Robertson and I guess have had this conversation since that October one, kind of when we wanted to do another one and whatnot. I think to the point, Ms. Hill, about long-term, short-term, I know I've talked to several employees and teachers in my district that are saying like we're struggling right now. And so I think we have to be realistic, and I told them that this is meant to be a short-term fix. Because when you talk about that's reoccurring revenue. We have a healthy fund balance, which is what, $45 million right now. And then we're going to be, we're projected to put more like we did, I guess 2 years ago. We were able to do that 10% raise before COVID, or 2% raise before COVID. We have a healthy fund balance, and it will be, even with this, if this passes, it will be expanding next year or this coming fiscal year due to increased sales tax. So I think we're in a very good place financially to tackle any problems. We just made it through a pandemic without having to really go into our fund balance all that much. But I think we can't control the problems that we can't control, and that's inflation and gas prices. I think of it as we're in a position right now through the leadership of this board being financially responsible, that we can do this thing to say, hey, we know it's tough out there. Here you go. We hope this helps somewhat. It's not going to solve all the problems, all the issues, but just tell our teachers that we're listening to them and the changes and the things they do. I know as someone on a single income, I know it's when I go to the grocery store, it's doubled almost, and my gas has went up, 30, 40%, and it's a struggle. So I think especially our younger, probably under 10-year teachers, under 5-year teachers, it hits the hardest. So I think we're in a great enough financial position where we can do this. We can absorb it and say, thank you to our teachers, and we hear you. But we're also in a great financial place where we can do this and athletic facilities down the road because of the growth the city or the county has seen. These conversations about this or this, I think is why we've been in a lot of conversations or a lot of places that we see ourselves in today that we've had to correct over the last 20 years, because it's a this or this, and sometimes, especially as we are right now, it can be this and this. And so that's fully in talking to Dr. Robertson, this wasn't just, to Marco's point, I think it was added late because we were having conversations about physical note to it and trying to figure that out, because unlike some of our other ones, the one in October, this is going to include everyone. That one was only people that were hired that were on payroll last year to this year. This is including cafeteria, bus drivers, and stuff like that. So I think it's a thoughtful thing, and it's the pleasure of the board. But I think and Mary Ellen is the expert in this, but I think we're in pretty good financial standing in our rainy day fund where we're going to be able to do this, and then potentially a significant facilities investment also based on our sales tax revenue. So that's just kind of where I'll leave that. But I think as this board we've done over the year, we kind of go back and forth in decisions and say it has to be this or this, but I think we have to have conversations about this and this. And that's definitely something, there's no one that has spent more time talking about facilities than me on the last 3 years. So anytime I can find money for facilities, I'm first one in line to do something. But I feel comfortable enough that we're able to do both things moving forward. Anything else on that? Okay, we will move to the book review committee. Ms. Hill.
Thank you, Chairman. So book committee, I'm not going to be able to be here on Thursday. I have a college visit with my daughter, so super excited about that, but disappointed I won't be here with you all. So just wanted to point out a handful of things. The goal, as I saw it with this committee, was to gain consensus around a contentious issue. I watched all 3 committee meetings. I did not see any consensus gained. And so what I looked for as I watched the meetings was where are the places where we have overlap. My thought would be that in gaining consensus, we would be trying to find a more practical path for parents to gain control of what their own children read. What I saw was that not everyone is in agreement that other parents, well, let me go back. So we need to provide a more practical path for parents to control what their own children read. But I believe we need to continue to work from the foundational concept that parents cannot control what other people's children read. And as I watched the committee meetings, I saw that we do not have agreement on that. There is a segment of the population, whether or not they have children in our schools, that that do not agree that they should not have control over what other people's children do. All that said, there was not a consensus met, and as best I can tell it, the recommendations that we have proposed to us do not represent the goal. They neither represent consensus and should not be perceived as representing consensus, nor do they address what I would say would be a commonly held concern of all persons on the committee, which is we need a more practical path for parents to control what their own children read. So as this body moves forward with further consideration of the reading of the book materials policies, it's important to me that we give it the same due diligence that we would any other policy as we consider it, and that each of us as board members, add to the consensus that was not found in the meeting. I was frankly really disappointed with how that process moved forward. I feel like our volunteers were not treated well. Meg Day's response about why she feels like these policies shouldn't even be considered was really striking, and is not in the spirit of the public input that I believe Hamilton County Schools and the Hamilton County School Board has been trying to foster over the last several years. I believe that we've tried really hard to show people that when you interact with Hamilton County Schools, you will be heard and you will be treated with respect, and that you'll participate in an orderly meeting, and I would say that none of that happened. So my hope would be that on Thursday, as this body considers the recommendations as they are, that we might dig a little deeper and try to offer some solutions to families that are practical, and also pay credence to the fact that we are in the business of education, and that we're committed to being a school district that's culturally competent and acknowledging the fact that people like to read different things. That's all. Thank you.
Ms. Thurman.
Yes, there's a few things about the committee. It became apparent after the first meeting we were not going to come to consensus about anything, no matter how many times we met. So that's why we narrowed it down to looking at one policy instead of all policies. One of the problems that some of the people on the committee had was there was not enough diversity. Well, that was not my doing. That was the members of this board. If there was not enough diversity on there, that was not my fault. Everyone got the opportunity to, and they kept wanting me to, I don't know if they wanted me to put people off the committee or put more people on the committee, but that's not what we decided to do. And also, before you leave, Jenny, the state of Tennessee is going to help us out with this, I think, because right now the obscenity laws in the state of Tennessee have exempted schools. And House Bill, and this is what I was trying to tell them at that committee that some of them did not want to hear, House Bill HB 1944 passed last Wednesday, I think it was. They passed one committee, it's going to the Senate committee, and I will be very surprised if it doesn't pass there as well. But it's going to, right now there is an exemption in the current obscenity laws that exempt schools. And after that passes, they are taking that exemption away. So we will have to live by the same obscenity laws as the public does. And so when that happens, the person that's going to be held responsible for that is going to be this board. And some of this stuff, like I say, these state representatives, some of these books do meet the criteria for obscenity. And so we're going to have to be very cognizant of that fact when we look at this policy. Scott is working on a policy. He kind of gave us his draft. He took consideration. He took questions from people. But what it is some people just wanted to, I've worked with women for 47 years. I know women very well. And I will tell you, some women just wanted to come in there and take over the meeting, and they just want to stomp their feet until they get their way. Well, like I say, I've worked with them for 47 years, and I'm not going to let them just continue to fill up my email with question after question, because I would go home and I work all day. Some of these ladies didn't work all day, and I guess they just sit around and decided questions they wanted to ask. But when I got home at night, it was a string of email from all these different people asking all these questions. And I answered the ones that I could, and after a while I just thought, you know what? They're never going to be satisfied with anything I say. So most of the committee members understood what we were trying to do and wanted to engage in the process instead of sitting around and saying, woe was me. So I think we got a lot of good input. I know Scott spent a lot of time answering a lot of questions. He spent a couple of hours the other day answering questions for people. But I think it is very important, and like I say, the law has not passed yet, but if it passes in the Senate, it will be effective immediately. So I would suggest that this is not banning books. This is not doing. I'm just saying, if some of these books do not meet community standards of decency, somebody's going to have to answer for that, and it's not going to be me. So I think that if we have things that are so bad that we cannot even put them up on our website, and that is one thing that I did ask, that everything that we were giving out at the committee be put up on the website, but it was so bad, some of it was taken off. I think that ought to be a red flag. But all of these, when I submit my report, and I've almost finished it, Sherry, I haven't yet, but I've almost finished it, and it's going to be very short because all of our meetings are online, and you are welcome to watch them, all the discussion. There's no sense in me making a report telling you about the discussion because you can watch it for yourself. But I thought we got a lot of good information. Not everybody's going to get everything that they want. And we're not here to provide reading material for everything that everybody thinks that their child wants. It's what we need to do to make this educational experience as good as it can be for all students in Hamilton County. So, like I say, we just need to keep that in the back of our mind. I don't know when it's supposed to go to the Senate. Do you know, Sherry, when it's supposed to be there? Is it
I think it's the 16th.
the 16th?
I thought it was tomorrow, yeah, or maybe it's Wednesday.
Is
Okay.
Tomorrow's the 15th, it's my mom.
Yeah,
I
so that's
think
fine.
it's Wednesday, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't know it was your
But I
mom's
could be wrong.
birthday.
Okay, I mean, it may be, it's usually on a Wednesday, but I'm not real sure. But anyway,
Yeah,
whenever it
okay.
is, I don't know how much discussion they will have before they vote. It's Wednesday. I don't know how long it will be before they vote it. But like I say, when it takes effect, it's going to take effect immediately. There's also another bill that is pending as well, and I don't have my notes in front of me, but it's to make sure that all books are online for all parents to see. We already do that in Hamilton County. But some of the suggestions were making age, have a notation of the age of books, to be noted along with the books. So there's some things that we're going to have to revamp, and it's going to have nothing to do with me. It's going to have to do with state law. And so, like I said, I don't know when those other ones come up either. I'm not sure when they come up. But those are just things we need to be looking at. But like I say, Scott's working on this. We had one group of people that thought we shouldn't even be having somebody on the committee didn't think we should even be having the meetings because she didn't think that the public should really have a say. She thought it should be us. I don't know who they think we represent, but I was assuming it was the public. Maybe I'm wrong. But, and then there was others that wanted us to literally write the policy, and I tried to explain to them that was not our job. Our job was to take recommendations back to the board, and the board would let Scott look at and write us a policy, and that's the way the process worked, and some people just didn't understand that's the way the process worked. But anyway, like I said, I will make my report I will submit my report on Thursday, and that's going to be pretty much it. But like I say, some people didn't feel like they were treated fairly, but some people just wanted to just talk the entire time, and they wanted their way, and everybody wanted their way, and when you get a lot of people like that, everybody can't get their way. So, like I say, Scott took the recommendations, looked over them, things you can do, some things you can do legally, and some things you can't. And Scott knows that. That's why we pay him the big bucks, you and Mary, to do that. So anyway, but like I say, I wouldn't be submitting my report, but it will be up to this board to make the policy and vote on it. And I don't know at that point if you want to turn it over to the policy committee for them to look at, whether you want us to discuss it, however you want to do it, but we will just give you our findings. Thank you.
Mr. Walker.
We started talking about books before I ever got appointed back in August. Chairman McClendon and Ms. Thurman, thank you for seeing the need to get a committee together. I think we did a disservice to, in some aspects, to our community. We were asked to get 2 people from each district to represent our community, and some of our members picked people to represent them. So I'll apologize to the community because we had a very simple task that we were asked to do, and I didn't watch the meetings. I watched 5 seconds of one and was very offended by the very first comments, and I thought, we asked them to do a job. Y'all going to report back to us with what they found. Didn't need me to be sticking my nose in there. That's how I felt about it. But, you know, when we get an opportunity to pick 2 people from each district to represent our district, I wish that going forward that we would do that and not get somebody to represent. I didn't pick 2 people to represent James Walker, and I think we missed the mark on some of that, but I look forward to seeing what the recommendations are, and thank y'all for heading that up.
Ms. Jones.
Well, first, I want to say this to James. I think that's rather subjective because I feel like I could say the same thing that you just said. So I think that's kind of subjective. But I have a question more so about the policy. So policy 4.402 on line 8, page 2. Hold on, let me get back. It's a whole lot of red lines right here. So, yeah, selection of instructional materials other than textbooks, page 2, line 8. So it says, to the extent to which the content may be considered offensive to community standards on the basis of profane language, graphic depictions, or violence or sex, etc., provided, however, that otherwise offensive materials may still be used if their relative literary value as measured in part by the criteria above outweighs the offensiveness of the content. The further provided that the judgment of the board, acting board policy number 4.43 shall be final. And then when you go back to page 1 of that policy, it states in line 27 and 28, it says suitably of instructional materials that include content which may be considered offensive to community standards by parents or students, for example, materials that contain coarse language. So one says coarse language and one says profane language. What's the difference?
Scott explained all of that the other night. He will be here probably. Is he going to be here Thursday? You can ask him. We went through a big explanation of all of that, why those 2 different words were used.
Oh, okay. I just was wondering why there wasn't a consistent language there. Also, when it says offensive to community standards, how are we defining community?
Well,
I mean, I'm saying, because I didn't watch the last one. I watched the first 2, but how are they defining it?
Well, you need to listen to what Scott had to say. That would have probably been the most important one to listen to when Scott did all the explanation.
I'm sorry.
The obscenity rules are, obscenity does have a definition, and it's things that cannot be done, you know,
That wasn't my question. My question was offensive to community standards.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. Community standards are what would be offensive in the community. I mean, if you can't read something out loud in front of a community, then that would be offensive. I mean, I would think that would be offensive to community standards. Things that you couldn't do in front of the community would be against community standards,
I guess I'm wondering, like, are we talking social norms? Are we talking values? Are we talking like what? I don't know. That's a Scott question. Don't worry, I'll hold it for Scott.
Yeah, hold it for Scott.
Lastly, I guess one big concern I did have is that are we truly talking about, so, okay, policy 4.402 is selection of instructional materials other than textbooks, and then 4.403 is reconsideration of instructional materials and textbooks. So I guess my question is, and once again, I missed the last meeting because, I mean, I was being a mommy and a wife, a daughter, something, I'm sure. But at the same time, are we talking instructional and choice materials, or are we just still talking choice materials?
What do you, I don't know what you're referring.
I'm saying, so this policy.
4.403,
And 4.402, because one says other than textbooks, and the second one says including textbooks. So are we talking both materials?
Well, the second policy is just the request for reconsideration. And that's of both the textbooks and library books. Those are
Right,
two
but-
different things.
But the first one is selection of, so I guess I'm questioning, how can you reconsider choice and instructional, but we're only talking about selection of just this piece?
Well, there's two different policies. The first policy is there's two. If you have a problem with the textbook, you follow the same process in policy 4.403 as you do. If you have a problem with a library book or textbook, you follow the same
Gotcha.
request for reconsideration. It's
Okay.
not just for that, it's for either one. And while we're discussing this, Scott also, since we didn't get into 4.403, Scott has been looking around at different counties all around Tennessee and then other states as well to streamline our request for reconsideration process because it is very cumbersome, and he's looking for a more streamlined process. Also, some things in the policy in 4.402 and 4.403, I can't remember which ones mention the ALA. I think it may be 4.402, which is American Library Association, and that is nothing but a union for librarians. So we looked at taking that out of there, and Scott did take that language out of there because really we shouldn't be referring to that organization to help us write our policies. We should write our policies, and they should be our policies. And also, the librarian's handbook is not an official document. We also reference that in the policy, and that has been taken out as well because that is not an official document of any kind. It has no legal standing whatsoever. So.
And the Library Bill of Rights.
And the Library Bill of Rights. What did I say, the Librarian Handbook? Well, the Librarian Handbook should really go along with our policy. We shouldn't be having to look at the Librarian Handbook to make our policy. They should be looking at our policy to make their handbook. And I think I meant the Library Bill of Rights, that's what I meant. Yeah, just not a legal document.
Ms. Jones, going back to your earlier question, that same I had this kind of the same question when I was looking at these policies. That 4.402, the selection of instructional materials, the title of it is kind of misleading a little bit because on the second page at the bottom, it has library collection and optional materials, and it's just one paragraph. And so it almost needs to be two different policies come out of that because it's talking about instructional material that are not textbooks, but then at the very bottom, there's a paragraph about library and optional.
Well, Scott is just pretty much
Yeah.
is going to redo the whole thing, and that's because it's so confusing, and that's one reason that we're just looking at them to clarify them, to make sure everybody's on the same page.
I just wanted,
Yeah.
because I think that's what you
Yeah,
were getting
that's-
to,
yeah.
but it's just that paragraph at the bottom that goes to libraries and optional reading material. Mr. Perez.
So I had the question about what the effect of this vote at the state legislature would have. Anyways, in other words, I have this question even through the committee. What is the conclusion that will reach as a committee if the state passes the law tomorrow, and will we have to revisit the whole policies again under the state law, or Wednesday, sorry, whenever it is. And so, Mary, I don't know if you can, is there really a point in looking at this right now, or is it best to see where things land? I think the public who is concerned needs to know that either way, who's concerned in either direction needs to know that the state is discussing this right now, and really our policies will have to, we don't have a choice, we will legally have to write our policies according to the state's directive. So,
Scott said the other day, he said he thought the policy was very clear, that the administration was just not following the policy. So I think that's a lot of the problem. That's why he wanted to clarify the language to make sure everyone understood what the policy said, because he said it was very clear. He said, and if they were following the policy, some of this literature would not be in our libraries. So all I'm saying is that's why they're working on this bill. I don't think it would change our policy at all. We just need to be sure that they are following the policy about some obscene and profane language and things like that. It's already in our policy.
Well, that's my question.
It's already in our policy. I'm just saying the state now is saying somebody's going to be held accountable if it's there.
I'm not fighting with you.
Oh,
or
I
arguing
understand.
with you.
No, I'm not.
I'm
Yeah.
asking what
Yeah.
the process is. I'm sorry, Ms.
Yeah.
Thurman. I'm asking what the process is when the state is having this discussion, and at the end of the day, they will tell us and every other district in Tennessee what we have to do. Again, I think the public needs to be aware of that, because we will, from the time I've been here, every time the state says you will do this, we rewrite a policy and say, hey, guess what? We will do this. So I want to know that part of it.
And that is a very good question. Looking at this, I don't think, and I'm looking at the summary of the bill
I kept looking.
text.
Where do I find the bill?
It's,
Tennessee legislature.
No, I saw that part, but I kept finding the summary. Yeah.
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 I felt I had to become an expert in searching bills, and that's why we have lawyers.
and so the summary is that if passed, the bill would prohibit an LEA or charter school from allowing obscene materials or materials harmful to minors to be available to students in school libraries controlled by the LEA or public school. So it would be about possession of the school materials. This bill apparently is directed toward things that are in the libraries.
Okay, so that again, my Wednesday, we will find out what law was passed, and I imagine Thursday we will have to apply and whether rewrite policy or whatever based on that. So that's kind of my question there. Am I correct on that at least? Like, if the state passes law, we'll have to basically look at that as the basis for whatever policy we write.
Certainly, yeah, it would have to, we'd have to see if any changes would be necessary and the extent of what those may be.
So that's kind of my point there.
I
Is
think
that I
Joe's
think
down there.
it'll.
Is that Joe down there?
Yeah. Mr. Wingate.
I think my light's on its last leg there.
So is mine, Joe.
So, one thing I just, for clarity, and it goes back to the discussion of the policy wording around supplemental or instructional material. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Parker, but any instructional material that we have or that we're using has already been vetted and provided by the state of Tennessee, right? So when we get ready, what's our next adoption? So when we get ready to adopt math curriculum, all that we can choose from are the options that the state says, here are your options. Is that right? So if that's the case.
Or you have to go outside and get a waiver every
Okay.
year if you don't use that. It's complicated.
But,
We've not done that.
right, but what I'm saying is, so when you got ready to choose, like, typically you're using the waiver for something you already have, though, right? Like, you're not going to use the waiver to go, well, we don't really like these choices, we're going to go over here and get what we want. You know, does that make sense? So, I don't know, that doesn't complicate it for me. It almost seems like we're trying to complicate the policy, and I want it to be as clear as it can be. But I absolutely understand supplemental material. But when it comes to like instructional material, we can't use anything that's not already been vetted by the state of Tennessee anyway. Am I right?
That's true.
And when we get ready to choose, we choose from the options that they give us. So that's and if that's not the case, and we still need to make sure that in the policy we recognize instructional material, I'm all for that. I wonder sometimes why we would do that if all that we can choose from is what the state allows us to choose from anyway.
But,
That's right, go ahead. It's
okay,
fine.
no, yeah, I was just gonna clarify, we didn't talk about instructional material, that was not what the committee did.
I know.
And that's really not what that policy is about, that policy is about other than textbooks, that's what it says, other than
Supplemental.
textbook.
But what I'm saying is, the way it was
other
read to me, that was included in there
Yeah, yeah,
also.
other than
So I don't understand why it's in there, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, okay, well, maybe Scott can clear that up, but yeah, we didn't even discuss textbooks, because that was not our
Yeah.
charge at all.
And it should, in my opinion, it shouldn't be in there unless
Yeah,
we
yeah.
need it,
No,
unless we
no.
need it to be in there.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
I think it
doesn't.
complicates or confuses
Yeah.
the policy because,
Yeah.
anyway, if I'm off the mark there, please
Well,
let me.
I do want to just make this one clarification. To further clarify, it's important to know adopted material versus what 4.402 clarifies, and that is instructional material other than textbooks.
Okay.
Right.
Because teachers can use
Right.
supplemental materials. They can use, say for instance, a video if they thought it would support a lesson. But all of that falls under 4.402. So just for clarification's sake, if it is an adopted resource, like our math adoption, our literacy adoption, it is all, we have a process through the state that we follow. Or else we have to seek out the state's approval every single year through a waiver, which that's really hard to do. So I hope that clarifies just a little bit.
Thank you.
As far as next steps, Ms. Thurman, oh, yeah, Dr.
I
Hobson.
feel compelled to address two things. I've been sitting here questioning whether I should say this or not, but I feel compelled to say it. First of all, so if there was an indication that the administration or any teacher or librarian or principal wasn't following this policy, I think it's important to go down and look at what was in the actual policy, because everything that was being talked about was library books and classroom libraries, and it was very clear in the old policy. Now that might get cleaned up in this one, that there would be books in there that had possibly not been reviewed, right, and that they would be open to making sure that they paid attention to that, reviewed them. But I just want to be clear that the policy as it was written was being followed. The second, and I guess it's more of a question for where we're going with this. We've tried to, because this is a policy discussion, which is your job, right? So we've tried to stay out of it, but there was a mention of Mr. Bennett putting together a cleaner procedure for review. That seems like a procedural administrative conversation. And so whatever we go, I want to make sure that we're clear for our understanding so that we follow the policy that's voted on and approved, and then our administrative procedures back that up.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it. So, yeah.
That was one of the conversations. That is the one line that gave an out to people for letting some of these books in there, like The Handmaid's Tale, for instance. That should have not been in the library if it was following that policy. And people say that book had been vetted. And this is another problem. Somebody's going to have to be accountable. We just can't have a book in there, and some of these books, people wouldn't believe some of the stuff that I've seen, not necessarily just from here, but from the state of Tennessee. I've been on the website looking at some of these books. I don't think people would believe some of the things. But there's a few lines in there that they seem to know how to get around. Well, that book hadn't been vetted. Well, in my opinion, there shouldn't be any books on our shelf that haven't been vetted. None. And just because we put that line in there, and then it says they're going to be continuously monitored, I think. Well, you can't have it both ways. It can't be continuously monitored and not vetted. It's either got to be either or. It can't be both. So we hope we can clean up some of that language. And like I say, I told Scott that one sentence that people kept. I don't have it right in front of me, so I can read it exactly which sentence it was. I think when it said there may be some that haven't been looked at, and And, you know, and if you find one of those books, then you can
Yeah, it
put
says- it
a
says-
request of,
There may be sensitive content contained in these books that was not previously reviewed by school personnel.
Yeah,
Parents
so-
should alert the administration about the sensitive content that is found in these optional materials.
Mm-hmm.
Administration will then undertake the reconsideration process outlined in 4.403.
But I think this bill, HB 1944, is going to address that. Somebody's going to have to be accountable, and that's what people were so upset about, is these books are in our library, and they say, hey, we said there may be some books in here nobody's looked at. Well, you know, you're not going to be able to hide behind that anymore. Somebody's going to have to be responsible and accountable. And there was one fella on the committee that had a great thing, and I don't know whether Scott's going to put it in his recommendation for a policy, but somebody's going to sign off on that book. So if we find one of these books that has some of the most horrible language and some of these illustrations and things that I've seen, go to that and say, well, so-and-so said this book was okay, and that's how it got on the library, instead of just saying, we don't know how it got there. You know, we said there'd be some books that hadn't been vetted. And I think that's why the state of Tennessee is going to all this trouble now to clear up some things and to take that exemption away from schools, because right now, even if they found something that was obscene in a school, they were exempted from this law. And that's all 1944 does, is take away the school's exemption. So I just wanted everyone to be aware of that.
So, but to my point, is this policy was adopted in 2018, it's been followed. I'm not saying that, I mean, it's y'all's choice to revise it, clean it up, but as it was adopted in 2018, that line was in there, and it's been followed.
And some people pushed it to the limit and over.
So going on next steps, we don't have this as a voting item for Thursday's agenda meeting. I think next steps is we'll get Ms. Thurman's report, we'll get the policy from Mr. Bennett, and then from there, I think we probably should go to a policy committee, Mr. Walker, in the next, between now and the next board meeting, or the Monday of that agenda session for next month, we can have one. And that gives us some time, along with Mr. Bennett, to work with administration on cleaning up.
I think we'll back up, I mean, once to the point, like what Ms. Thurman was saying earlier, we've got to have the policy first so that our procedures will match the.
Well, that's what I'm saying, bringing administration, Mr. Bennett, and us to kind of the table.
And
then-
we've got a couple of budget meetings that are coming up or scheduled.
So we can tie them
could
to
maybe
that.
tie policy.
So have a policy meeting to kind of get more into that and get more detail from Mr. Bennett on this and what he's doing. That also buys us a little time to see what the state does, because it will go out of committee, then it'll have to go to the House floor, Senate floor, governor will have to sign it from there. So that will kind of give us a little bit of a way to go path on that. So I think that's the plan that we'll probably take with that. Mr. Walker and I will get together with Dr. Robertson and probably tag on to one of the budget committee meetings coming up. Any other questions?
No.
You good?
I don't want
Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 delegations speaking on Thursday. And then you have your legal services report, your events and announcements, and that is it. Any questions?
Also, I think Scott was going to work with Jamie. Jamie was in our committee meetings too. He's working with him to kind of clean up the policy and make sure everybody's on the same page.
That's
and how to
correct.
clean it
They're
up.
going to work, and one of the things that Scott told me they're going to do is figure out what's going to go in the policy and what's going to go in the procedures. Yeah.
So again, to be clear, whose job is it for the procedure? Is it our job or is it Scott's job?
No, that should be your job.
It's your job. Yeah. And that's where we'll get him and us together and policy-wise.
Just trying to be clear.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think
Yes.
it's a good question, but yeah, absolutely.
It
I
is.
think you guys know it best, right? Like,
Okay, with that, any other questions?
That's subjective. There's a whole lot of subjectivity going on around here.
Okay,
You
we'll-
know what that means? We'll make sure everybody knows what subjectivity means before we have a discussion about it, okay?
Now we will adjourn.